done and then...
Yeah, I can wait a bit.
Start straight away.
I can wait for 1 minute, 2 or 3.
Okay, so...
Yeah, to start?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. I'm Marcel van Brakel from Polymorf. We're a design studio based in the south of Holland, in Eindhoven. But we have a working space in Breda, also in Holland. And I'm so happy to be here. Thanks to the organization for letting us share our work and your patience. And normally I talk too much, like my previous artists with their amazing work. So if you think it's becoming boring, just do this, or swipe it away and I'll stop, or you throw down your handkerchief or something like that. Polymorf is a design studio. We're there with 3. I'm the founder of Polymorf. Started it I think in 2007, something like that. And now at the moment there's also Peter Boos now working and Mark Meeuwenhoort. And with that core team we kind of hiring extra people to do our job, to do our things. And previously we also worked with Frederick During. I want to mention him because some of the works I'm going to show, he was one of the main collaborators. So I want to mention him. Thanks. This is an image of Peter's daughter during REM sleep. She is dreaming. And it kind of sums up what we're trying to do with the studio. We're trying to dream about new possibilities, about new futures, about new stories, maybe. So Polymorf, we try to create critical or speculative work, and we do that in an embodied way. So we always involve the body, actually, and create a physical experience out of it. A lot of speculative design is like brainy, and you cannot really experience it. So we think it's important to do that, and we're trying to do that in the cross sections between science, art, design, and technology. And in one way or another, they are always interconnected. One of the things is that I think, which is important in our work, is that we kind of think that we see the brain as this like predictive machine. Actually, the brain tries to speculate and make assumption about things that might happen, and that also maybe explains why we love stories so much. Because the story is like this virtual space where we can kind of, in a safe environment, test out future scenarios or current scenarios so we can be more adaptive to change and transition. So for us, storytelling is an important part. The brain is speculative in its origin. One of the other things is that the world is in a constant state of flux, we think. It's changing, our bodies are changing. We had some more exciting examples in previous presentation in which direction the body might change. And if the world is changing that much and the way how we build narratives about it, it's also important to understand them and to be critical about it and to kind of frame them and reframe them. So that's what we try to do in our work. And actually our goal is to kind of be in front of the troops, trying to kind of anticipate on the future. The last thing we built with every means necessarily. I was graduated as a film artist, a film student, film artist. I worked as a film artist. Then I moved into theater. Then I moved into interactive art. So I'm loving all this kind of stuff. So why narrow it down to one medium? We take anything that matches our ideas and that kind of stuff. Just some framing. How we think about the world and how we build these narratives. We already started about that a bit. Like if you think about the brain is constantly making these narratives. So that's one of the focal points. What is happening in that process with the communication of the brain and its sensory system? And so, of course, we can only build narrative from the input that we get from our sensory system. So what is happening in that interaction? Can we build narrative within that space? And another thing also already mentioned was, as a body, the human body is kind of average, it's kind of fragile. If you put a baby in a desert, it will probably not survive. Maybe you also would not survive, you would be in a desert. Because the human body is not that well built. We're not the strongest, not the fastest here on Earth. We think we're the smartest, but we can talk about that. But being such an average animal, one of the things that kind of makes us outstanding is that our ability to create technology. And we already had that discussion that our clothing is actually also a technology. Often when we talk about technology, we think about something with a plug and electricity, but actually your clothing is a design created to regulate your temperature. So we're already adaptive, we are already cyborgs, whether we like it or not. And we're, as a tool-making species, we have to think what that means and be critical about it, but also maybe explore opportunities beyond what we're already doing. So as the human body augments itself by means of technology, the brain is also augmenting itself by means of language and social interaction. So we build cultural systems to kind of enlarge our power to create multi-bodies of communication of groups. Though the social body is also, you might say, a layer, a more outer layer of the actual body. And then maybe the part that we often forget is that we're interconnected to the ecosystems and to other living beings. If you look at the body mass of a human body, it's like, I think, 90%, something like that, 99, 98. It's human flesh. It's not human flesh, it's microbes living in and on the body. So if we think about the body, it's mainly non-human. And this non-human factor is very important, has all kinds of interaction with the physical human body. And we often forget that we are connected to that, and that's very important. So our work slowly navigated to kind of explore all these fields. Yeah. But I want to take you on a journey on how we ended up there. So we started off as a theater group. When I started Polymorf, we were a theater group, and we made Sigmund. This was our first production, but we did kind of local-based experiences. So it was not like this. We had a stage and with the audience, and we could just sit there and we could throw your story at you. But it would be a total environment where you could be in a certain space. And in the case of Sigmund, the first piece, that was some kind of the bunker system of the Hitler bunker, the Führer bunker. So the story was designed, inspired on a book of a German writer, Marcel Bayer, and he wrote the book Flughunde, because there was a very interesting find after the liberation of the Führer bunker in Berlin. They found a collection of sound. A sound collection, old gramophone recordings and tapes with human voices, human sounds in all kinds of expressions, crying and shouting and in pain or in pleasant, and that triggered him to create a fictional story, which was such an amazing story that I took that as a backstory for this project. And within the project, the main character thinks that the human soul is kind of housed in the vocal cords of human beings. And every time when you speak and use your vocal cords, you're etching your story, your narrative into the vocal cords. So the vocal cord becomes this kind of brain, this kind of memory of the life that you've lived and the way you've lived it. So within that piece, the main character is trying to figure out how this works as a scientist, and he was so fixated by the idea that he kind of moves towards the Nazis, and it becomes a very unpleasant person. He navigates it towards evil. And that was, but the interesting thing, we built this kind of bunker complex like a body. So we had like hard concrete walls, and we had soft parts that could change during the performance. Like your vocal cords are kind of hidden in your skeleton, and they're saved there. This was all about trying to find your flexibility as a human to kind of overcome evil in a way. This is some of the design shots. But what I found interesting was that we created this kind of different staging, where we had like actors in the experience, and we had the audience also in there, so 30 people for each shift. And they were free to go wherever they go. So there was no fixed staging. And that created a parallel storytelling experiment. So we had like, the sound was you could hear the sound everywhere. Some sound would be local, but together they would be one composition of sound. And depending on where you would be in the installation, would have a collective idea about what happened, or a very personal, individual idea about what happened. And that was really cool, because then the audience could take certain strategic points within the installation. Sometimes you could see everything, you can experience everything without moving, and other people should move, or they would miss stuff. So you had this really interesting dynamic that you were part of history in the making. Like in reality, you are also connected to the history in its resolve. But you had a very individual, different experience of this history. And also in this project we worked with video projection and live action combined. And also we like to work with technology. For instance, because this voice was such an important thing in the piece, we recorded the song, and we shot video footage of what the vocal cords are doing at the moment that they're singing. So this is the footage that we used in the performance.
De hart spuwt worden tot kapot gereden hoopjes klank.
Inside, we never see that perspective, but and also it shows the vulnerability of your inside and the inside of your body. This is a small clip of the performance just to show you, but for me it was an important work because it was the first time to work with parallel storytelling in a complex manner.
De stemmen van de spelende kinderen ergens in een gang. Ver weg. Het geluid fluistert me beelden in. Helga bindt een doek voor. Een schoen botst tegen een deur. Een van de kleintjes roept: we zijn verstoord. Vanaf nu wil ik alleen nog chocolade als ontbijt. Chocoladesoep als lunch. Chocoladetruffels op mijn bureau. Daar wil ik niet over hoeven denken.
It was an opera, of course. It's a chamber opera. We had like all the music written for this voice, for voice only, with no instruments. And we had an electric artist, electric musician, Yves Dropper from Belgium, creating digital audio based on by manipulation of the human voice. So that was like the content-wise. So that was a very interesting project. I think it was very, very important for us. And then after that, we moved to another project, which was bagage. And bagage means luggage, the stuff that you take with you. And it was based on my relationship with my mother, because my mother had a gambling habit, and she didn't want to lose all her money, and then she asked me to go with her, and we end up in some kind of dodgy mafia run places near the border in Germany. But the interesting thing was that if you want to get in, you could pay €25, and you could have 25 euros of chips to play with, and then food and drinks were for free. So you cannot lose money to do that. And of course, everybody who went in got trapped and never get out. And these places were kind of populated with elderly people, gambling away their pension, actually. So I was so kind of shocked about that kind of hidden realities. Not a story that we kind of talk about. That I made a piece about it. And within that piece, we also combined rock music of a rock combo and video mapping. So you had a stage that could move and transit from scene to scene, and we would track that with sensors, and we could do projection mapping on that, and also on the body of the actors. So we also involved technology, and this ended up in some kind of nightmare scenario. The people were in between life and death. And this is some shots of that. This is what of the stage. How do you make a transitional stage? It could change shape. Some shots of that. So that was some of my theater background, just to show you that we started a experience. This is not. After working in the theater for a while, I get bored with it, because it was always this long trajectory. You had to have a lot of money to make it happen, and it was a lot of application. Every project took like 3 years, and I was fed up with that. So I wanted to make more interactive art, more short projects, more playful, just play around. And the first one was the hardware. It was a commissioned work where we also teach it to university, and the university asked us at an anniversary to make a piece about learning. And of course, learning is about making connection in the brain and with each other. So we created 5 kilometers of LED string interconnected in some kind of network, and we coded the interactions of the particle being traveling in this space, forming this kind of interconnected brain kind of work. It was just for beauty, nice to look at. but also it was a very hypnotic work, I think, which was interesting sometimes that you don't overthink and it's just there. Another of this like fast pet projects to get me going was like personal logo generator, where we did an intervention. People could create, they should fill in this form, and we had all kinds of opposites on the application form. You could choose whatever, and that would help you to redefine who you are, actually. And behind that, we had an analog algorithm, in a way, that created imagery. So we take a photo, and then we would read out the choices that you made, and that would create the artwork and also a personal slogan, kind of. So you could do some self expression or show off your identity, and it created this kind of really strange, different posters. And the audience would have one copy for them to get home, and the other one we put on the wall. These are some of the algorithms behind it, or the transitions you could choose. Other small, tiny project to make fun, Cyber Botanica. We had that a lot already. Also, if we hear about when I'm teaching, it's always about the human. If we tell stories, it's always about the human. So, and I get kind of bored with that story because it's also problematic. Because if we take ourselves always in the first position and make ourselves the most important actor, it ruins the environment, ruins the ecosystem, it ruins a lot of things. So why should we always design for humans? Can we also use our design power to design for ecosystems or for plants, for instance? So this was a small playful project to make prosthetics for plants and to kind of create new species plants with robotics. And this is an example that could spit. So we had a sensor, if you would come too close, it would spit foam at you to chase you away. But we would also have like plants with tentacles. If you touch them, you would scream. All this kind of, we had this little garden of strange new plants with strange prostheses. Another short project going to mention, not going too deep into it, is Phantom Pain, Phantompijn. There was a theater piece investigating a relationship with machines, in this case drones. So the drones, we looked at it as an extended part of your body. So we had all actors in these kind of boxes in an old church, medieval church in Holland. And they were glass boxes, they could not get out, and the only way to interconnect was with drones. So you could steer drones to send messages or to go with the camera to the other one to make a connection. So there was like this totally sealed off, Corona time situation where the technology was the only way to kind of overcome that. All that work kind of sparked the interest. The university asked us to do a research project, to define a research project, and we could do whatever we wanted. And then I thought, well, mainly if we think about design, and I'm a very visual designer, I like images, we design for the eyes, of course, and sometimes we also design for the ears, but we hardly design for any other of the human apparatus, for any of the other senses. So that got me thinking about doing a project about smell, and we didn't know anything about smell, nothing. So for us it was a deep dive into a new universe, but it encapsulated us so much that we wrote a book about it with our ideas and with the best practice of artists all around the world, sharing new concepts on how you can design with smell in a meaningful way. And also to share the latest in research. So that was called the Sense of Smell project. And if you think about smell, it's such an amazing thing, because if you smell, you're actually having connection with the actual molecule. Smell is a molecule and it's just flying in the air. And at the moment that you're smelling your neighbor at this moment, the physical body of your neighbor is in your nose. So it's the most intimate medium maybe possible. And it's really there. It's really interesting. If you have, in Japan, you have, of course, the biggest porn industry in the world, and they sell like the knickers and the underwear of famous porn stars with the smell of the porn star. So you can have the real actual connection of the body when you sniff it. Also, smell is interconnected with all these parts in your brain. So it's interconnected with your emotional amygdala, so and your emotional reptile brain. So when you smell something unconsciously, you don't know that you're smelling something, but it triggers emotion. And it's also involved in that way in storing memory and emotion, because memory is stored by its peak. If it has a high peak, you get an endorphin signal to kind of store the thing, and emotions plays a very important part of it. So that's also why smell can kind of trigger emotion in a very easy way. So as an interaction designer, interested in creating meaningful interaction or story, or more immersive storytelling, smell is an amazing new tool to work with. Another thing that kept us thinking, if we think about smell is data, and we use it as data all the time. Only we don't know, because it's unconscious. So if, for instance, we can smell fear of another person, and then we can smell if we're angry, afraid or not. It's actually just this physical interaction. The woman here in this space, they can smell if another woman in the same space has ovulation and is fertile. And from that moment on, as she knows that, she kind of is more passive aggressive towards the woman, because she's more, she could be interested in your man. so this is like interactions, all subconsciously. We use it, that data, all the time, but we hardly design for it. So we also stumbled upon the first experiment to do manipulate behavior with smell. In Eindhoven, you have like this restrict with all these bars and dancings and discotheques, and of course, when they close down, people are drunk and there's a lot of violence, but they use citrus smell to kind of smoothen up the emotion and take out the aggression. And there's also a very interesting apparatus where they use cinnamon smell to enforce appetite with elderly people. So people who are old, they often don't eat enough, and they have this clock, and they trigger it just half an hour before you have to eat, and then the body thinks, I have to eat. So it opens up all these interesting new possibilities for interaction. This is a piece of research that we found out, I think University of Texas, I'm not sure, I have to check, but they made ink that can react on certain smells. So you can have like interactive print. So for instance, if you think about this packaging, for instance, and we think the food that we throw away because we think it's over the expiration date, we throw away way too much food in the bin. If we would have packaging that could smell the actual level of freshness of the food, which is of course dependent on the context. If I have this outside of my fridge, it's going to be less fresh. You have a smart, interesting new way of communication. So we devised all these kind of concepts, which we put it in a book and shared it with the audience. This was also a concept we came up with, or thinking about smell made us realize that the body smells, of course. And if you look at the perspective from another animal, maybe, who maybe is not looking at you but smelling you, your body has a different shape than the physical body, the physical object. Your smell body is dispersed over a large area. So you have this, you wear this kind of aura, this sentient body part that is also traveling in time. Because maybe you're not there in the room, but your body is still there. Or it can move ahead of you into the future, to a place that you are going to come to. So that was also interesting to think about, what we perceive as a body is mainly framed by what senses do we think are most important. Of course, we create a lot of concepts around smell, and the first thing that we did after that is build a smell printer, because if you want to create smell and work with it, you need to control it. So we created an apparatus to kind of precisely control smell for art pieces, and then we created famous steps. And I'm going to show you first a clip, a teaser. Or more freezing cells, and as an audience you get into it, and we close the door in a dramatic way because we're also making theaters. So bang, you cannot get out, and you're locked into the darkness. And then we put in smell into the boxes and sound. So the experience is only smell and sound. And the smell and sound, they trigger a documentary story about the last 5 minutes of a famous person until you die. So you actually, it's a death machine, and it's from first-person perspective. So you actually be Whitney Houston, or Gaddafi, or Vincent van Gogh, or Lady Diana, or John F. Kennedy, up till the moment that you die. And the interesting thing is that, of course, in this way, it is some kind of analog VR system in a way. It's first perspective. You're there in the being there. You're being there. You experienced it in a physical way because the smell is also emphasizing reality in a way. So we look at it as this kind of VR system. But you're also the creator of the story. That's what I want to say. So the story is your own creation. Because you already have the medialized imagery in your brain. Why should we give you the image if you already have it in your brain? So we thought that was really cool to kind of use the brain of the audience as the main interface in a way also. And we try to create these stories as realistic as possible in a documentary fashion. So we did a lot of research. This is the hotel room. It's police photos of the hotel room where Whitney Houston died. And she died after using crack cocaine, but you could also see she had like mint cigarettes, and she had like this Budweiser, and so we could know what kind of smells would be present in her bathroom. And then she died. This is actually the bathtub where she died, and you can see this gravy jar on the bottom of the bathtub. And the gravy jar was filled with olive oil because she wanted. It was filled with olive oil. So the olive oil, we know that the smell was present there in that situation. So we, as like a detective, we're trying to figure out what was happening. Can we make a reconstruction of the events? And then we created a six-minute experience. We also did Gaddafi, and the interesting thing in the Gaddafi story is that, of course, Gaddafi, he flies from Sirte, where he's under attack, and he sees an enemy territory, and his convoy gets attacked by French jet fighters, and he gets bombed. And of course, in that moment, we used the smell of burned stuff. And actually, a lot of people within the experience, they experienced that at that moment, they thought that we were heating up the installation because they were becoming very hot. They said, are you tampering with temperature within the experience? And of course we didn't. So all these kind of strange effects happened when people doing the Whitney Houston experience, they thought, and they were having the crack cocaine, they thought their hair was on fire, or that kind of weird, or they've lost their sense of space, or all this kind of weird stuff. But we kind of realized it's kind of logic, because if you smell this smell of burnt stuff, your body goes to flight or fight mode. So it tries to protect itself and pumps the blood around so it can fly the situation. But this is of course unconscious and in that situation unnecessary. But it tells a story about how our body and our behavior is like automated on a lot of levels. And we think that we're in control, but we're not. This is one of the early prototypes when we didn't know anything about smell. We just did the real thing. So for the Gaddafi story, we had to have a goat poo, and I went to go to the zoo to get it. Or we would use cannabis, and we would just buy it at our drugs in Amsterdam and just heat it up. We had all these kind of chemicals, but of course that's not ethical and it's not safe. So we use only very special oils that are synthesized and safe for no allergic response. But I want to show you that we always start with just trying to piece stuff together and to trying to get to grips with something we don't understand ourselves. And I think that's interesting. Our work on smell caught the attention of IFF, and IFF is one of the main companies producing smells and taste pigments in the world. And they every year they launch their new collection of smells, and they asked us to future think smell. So we did a show in New York with 7 new pieces we created for them, and I want to show you the trailer. With sound, if possible.
Yeah.
Is it mine?
It's on its own, but...
Maybe I shut it out. Oh, I don't have some. Can you plug the... Okay, then without sound. Oh, that would be a pity. Shall I escape? Let me see. Reconnect. And also my power will work.
No, it's reconnecting.
Ah, thanks. Sorry for this short interruption. So avant-garde.
How we can create, based on our molecules, a garden of evidences. The world is changing tremendously. Start imagining where perfumery will be 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
So we created the whole show in New York with all these kind of new ideas about how smell could be important in the future. This is a project where we work with a scientist. He was studying city stress, and of course that's increasing, and one of the problems is that you don't go outside of your apartment, you don't meet each other. There's a lot of things that kind of contribute to that. So we built an app with a questionnaire to kind of measure your city stress. So the city stress is kind of averaged for the city of New York, and then we created the idea of a mood cloud as an intervention into public space to kind of fly to your stress zone and to drop down relaxing perfume. Which is also interesting because then people might go outside, experience it, but also talk about it. Because if we do things like this famous desk, a lot of people are thinking about and talk about it and share ideas about it. So that was our idea to kind of have some contribution on this problem as a speculative design. Another project that we did, algorithmic perfumery. Here we worked with a sound designer. I forgot his name. But an artist, and he makes this beautiful music, but it's very abstract and it's algorithm. So the algorithm creates the music, and then there's a button, and if an audience experiences a piece of sound that it likes, it can push the button, and then the machine creates the perfume based on the algorithm to translate the music into a perfume. So we actually have the smell of the sound, a translation from the algorithm into the perfume algorithm. This is actually the work with Mark and Frederick, one of the former, and Frederick now has created a startup working this machine for the audience, so you can buy in a shop an algorithm based on your personality will make your personal perfume. So that's now a commercial company. One of the other works, it was more is a dialect for a new era. If you look at endangered Indians in the Amazon or stuff, they have like words for smells. While we in the West, we hardly have any grammar for smell. We don't say it smells like this, or if we do say want to describe a smell, we say it smells like this, but we don't have a word for it. So the loss of words of grammar for smells has of course to do with the meaning of smell in our environment has got lost. Since we don't live in the forest and it's important to communicate about smells, we lost the ability. We kind of de-smelled our world. There's nothing smelling if we have a piece of meat, it hardly smells anymore. It's all sealed off for hygiene. So the idea was to kind of think about new narratives, new ideas that doesn't have a word yet, to put it in one word, and to create a smell for these words. So to make a lexicon of new words, but with smell tones. So for instance, the idea of collective déjà vu. After 9/11, sometimes we have this, that we already been here as a society, and maybe we don't have a word for it, but maybe we can make a smell for it, and we have the secret society of people that can communicate with smells to kind of share messages. This is the one, and I have one other one, and each of these pillars you could push a button and you would release the smell, and so in this way you could learn the grammar. We had some speculative designs for smell interventions. So maybe you have a rally against Trump or whatever, and you want to also emphasize that with a certain smell. Or maybe this was some kind of smart Spider-Man apparatus. You could wear it in secret under your arm and you could smell tag some place in the city. Or you have maybe this bracelet that kind of use biometric measurements of arousal and stimulate sexuality or whatever. Thinking about smell and seeing it as a hormone, because smell is actually a hormone, made us think about if we medialize stuff, we always have a media outside of the brain to kind of to communicate the story. And if smell could be such powerful to kind of directly influence the brain, can we not make stories with the brain without any media in between? So that made us thinking, and we considered some concepts to use, like sequence of hormones to create storytelling. So hormonal storytelling, you have infused, and we could kind of control going from happy to sad to aroused or whatever. It could also mean that maybe I could have like an emotional transplant of the emotion of my pet. If my pet feels happy, I can have the same happiness at the same time. You can have this like complete, like interactive communication. We talked with a lot of scientists about it, and the thing is, people don't know anything about hormones. They know they are there, they know the working of specific hormones, but what they don't know, if I would administer like 3 or 5 or 6 in a row, how they influence each other, because they're chemicals. So it's way too dangerous, of course. So we had to skip that beautiful idea. Also, why I like it so much is because we kind of know, if we look at the medium, or we look at the TV, that the media is like a fabrication, and the reality depicted in the media is always fake. It's always uncertain to be true. We never know if it's true, especially now in the area of fake news and manipulation, media manipulation. So the only way to kind of figure out if we're right about reality is to trust our feelings. And we often say that to ourselves, okay, I'm not sure, but I trust my gut feeling, I trust my emotion. But if we create an art piece in which you cannot trust your emotion, because it might be manipulated in the same way that we manipulate the image, you turn in the constant state of psychosis. And I think that's a very important narrative for this moment in time. So I still want to make something like that, but still haven't figured out how. But cinematic theater is like a long-term research line that we keep on pushing within the studio. Also interesting, we think we have one brain. An octopus has multiple brains and is distributed throughout the whole body. So it has a brain in every tentacle. And recently we discovered we have the same thing. We have a specialized brain in the heart, and we have a specialized brain in the gut system. Actually, the gut system has more brain cells than your brain. So the idea of us having consciousness in your brain over here, making all of the major decisions, might be wrong. Actually, we want to challenge that idea in our work. So that was all this kind of inspiration points. This is another inspiration point. It's really cool. This Jack Gallard's lab, what they're doing, they're working on paranormal telepathy. So what you see is imagery of human faces as they are shown to a test audience, and underneath you are seeing the interpretation of an AI of the imagery. So it's learning how to recognize, of course, certain faces and image patterns. And they were able to kind of tap off doing a mind reading of the electrostimulus in the brain at the same time. So the computer could learn to recognize the brain pattern at the moment that the audience is looking at these images. And that's very cool, because then the computer can kind of interpret and visualize what you're thinking of and what you're dreaming of. So that could be the first step to like dream sharing, brain sharing, collective hallucinations, using the brain as a media interface. Of course, raising also a lot of questions, because if I'm implanting my memory into your brain, whose memory is it? Or can I use your brain content for mine? What happens if we merge? But also what happens if we move towards a collective brain paradigm where every thought is uncertain if it's yours or not. So it might change to a complete different kind of civilization or idea about self. And so that's stuff that is kind of dripping into our world. This is first the inspiration, but later on I can show you where we end up with. One of the first works that we did with within the synaptic theater research line is the Entangled Body. Because we realized if we cannot really directly input the brain in a way that we want to, then we start with outputting the brain. And that's of course a known technology already. So we used, so this is an image of a medium, a paranormal person, and she's having ectoplasma out of her body as an interconnection between her as a physical body and the spirit world. So there are spirits, and you have this ectoplasma connecting the spirit world with the actual body. That's of course if you believe in that stuff. You have a lot of these kind of photos at the start of the century, when we just discovered photography, and we thought, oh, we can make a ghost image that's fun. So what's interesting is about it is that technology changes the way how we look to each other, and also how we can recreate the narratives that are already in our and how we see each other. Maybe in the beginning of the century we thought we had a soul that could travel in and out of the body, like now we have a different perspective from that. So this maybe the chance is quite big that this is a fake photo. But we tried to create an entangled body of the ghost of your brain. So what we did is, this is the first one. We created this pot, and within the pot, one user can sit, and it wears a BCI, and the BCI is looking at alpha waves of the brain, and it can predict what kind of emotional state you're in. So we look at a certain amount of focus, amount of movement, a lot of, and we can from all of these data we can kind of predict you're relaxed or you're not relaxed, or you're focused or whatever, and then we translate that into a sculpture. Here you see my son in the installation, and the sculpture is created as an emotional expression of your emotion. So if you're agitated, the shape in the computer is agitated. The sculpture is agitated form. If you feel very, very relaxed, the shape is very relaxed. And we project that sculpture in mid-air, in between these pyramids. So you see here you have these pyramids, and they emit ultrasound. And with the ultrasound we can kind of laser position points in the air to vibrate, and that means that we can create a sculpture in the computer in mid-air, hovering here. You cannot see it, but you can touch it, and it's a ghost image of your brain. So we created a ghost in space, you can touch it. And with that you create an entangled relationship with yourself. Because maybe I feel happy and I touch myself and I get scared, and it changes the data. And of course the data changes the sculpture and creates this feedback loop. And we also use sound with that to emphasize, to help the owners understand what we are feeling. And it was very interesting because for the first time we did with smell, it was physical stuff, but with this work nothing was physical. It was only air vibrating. What I also found very interesting was that in the computer we built a reality, but in reality where you experienced it was not there. Only at the moment that you made a virtual contact with the virtual object, it would cease into existence. A bit like with quantum effects, if you want to do a measurement on a particle, it merged into existence by the action of measuring it. So in this system we had the same system at work. So I'm not going to show the pictures too long, but this is the setup. We track your body, we see your hand position, and within the pyramids we have the ultrasound moving, creating the sculpture. This is an image of using the technology to hover a water drop. So the water drop is now manipulated by the sounds. And of course we do not use the water drop, but air only, just to show you. And this is research by a university in Sussex on shape and emotion. So what kind of shapes trigger what kind of emotional response or understanding of the emotion. And we use that to kind of base our models. This was a sketch for calmness, and this was a sketch for anxiety, but at the same time we realized we were still designing as a visual artist. So this looks cool, and then you would like feel it, you cannot make sense out of it. So it's really cool to understand how limited, how fast you fall into the trap of being a visual animal. This is one of the setup they're preparing, which is smaller with more individual pots. One last thing that we're also preparing within the Synaptic Theatre project is the micro-brand restaurant. We want to create a restaurant experience where you not eat to still your hunger, but to manipulate your emotions. And we manipulate your emotions by feeding the microbiome in your gut system. Because most of your neurotransmitters in your brain, they are produced by the gut system, the microbes in your gut system. So there's a direct connection between depression, some brain disease even, between your gut system and the microbe activity and ecologies that you prefer within your gut system and your brain. So this kind of will be a performative piece where you have this feeding experience, not for your stomach, but for your anus and for your brain. So that's something we're working on. Other piece of important insight that we gained from the research in Synaptic Theatre is this research from a Finnish university, and what you're seeing is not a heat cam, but the result of data. So they surveyed a lot of people and asked them if they would have a certain emotional state, what would be the physical response of the emotional state. So where would you feel heat transition or anxiety or vibrations or other stuff happening in your body? And that resulted in this map, which is pretty awesome because in the beginning we thought it was a heat map. But you can see if people are angry, for instance, you have like activity in your or experience in your fists. And it makes of course sense because maybe if you feel angry you might become aggressive and have to hit someone. And that made us all realize that if you think about emotional and how the body manages itself, it does of course with blood flow. It pushes the blood to where it's needed to stimulate the activity. So if you have you have to digest your food, blood flow goes to your stomach. You're not that smart anymore, and the blood is there to kind of help stimulate the digestive system. If you're sexual aroused, of course, it goes to your sex organ. So the body regulates itself often by blood flow. So that started with an experiment. From that on, we thought, well, maybe we can do narrative with that. So instead of just making a story and the story triggers the emotion, can we do it the other way around? We just trigger emotion and then the story gets enriched by it. So we just recorded some narratives, simple narratives, and then we strategically trying to cool down or heat up parts of the body within time to kind of have a strategic manipulation of the body at certain moments where we want to have a peak experience. And it was really cool. This doesn't get people crying, but it really helps to kind of change the immersion of the experience into, as an actor, I know that being close or opening up the body is a very important part in giving expression, but also in experience. And this worked like that. So you have like parts of your body cooling down, of course, shrinking in a way, feeling closing the body, and heating up is opening the body. And it was a really powerful tool to work with. So that triggered to make a new work, and you already saw it in the trailer of Avant-Garde, which is called Cosmic Sleep, where we use smell, temperature, animation, and sound to create an immersive experience for one person. Here you can see all these transducers, and they can cool down or heat up very fast in a controlled manner. And with that we can create a blanket to create heat animation on the body. So we could cool down or heat up parts. And within the experience you would be not a human but a comet traveling our solar system in an ever lasting cycle. And you would feel the orientation of the sun, you would feel the cold of deep space, you feel the comets hitting you and that kind of stuff, creating quite an abstract work. This is the waffle you need to be put under to. It's some kind of Frankenstein machine, it actually is. But it's really strange. I've never experienced something like that because we always know, yeah, the sun is there, there's the heat. But if I don't know, it's really strange that my shoulder becomes warm at certain moments. So it's really strange to experience. And for us it was also very important work because it was the first work that we kind of made a work which was not from a human perspective. And of course it was telling a story that might be meaningful for a human. Because if I have this transition from the cold of deep space, heating up, have all this activity, and then die off again in the deep cold, it is this eternal transition from getting birth, living and dying. So, of course, as a human you make a narrative from it, but the stone is just a stone. It doesn't feel it, but it has the narrative. And with that we have scientists to create the smell of the comet. So we could have the scientific data, we know the smell, and they made a composition on the smell of the comet. That's the cosmic sleep, this is the comet. Rosetta, the one that's Rosetta is on and monitoring. If we look back, we kind of understood that if you look at media design, especially within our own practice, but maybe also more in a general way, you see a transition from looking at, if you look like old-fashioned media, it's always, the media is out there, I'm looking at it, but it's not with me. Towards more event, more experience-driven design, where the audience is there. It's in the space with hardwired, it's in the coven, it's in the situation. And our last works are more navigating towards being it. Because it might be the next step of immersion, that in the be it situation you have the full agency to control. This is some matrix we kind of worked out about interaction. So if you have that as a system, how can you design interaction from that system? And you can have also people as a character placed in a certain position, or as a ghost, meaning no interaction or interaction. And that changed that's kind of opening up a palette of interactive work. We thought it was very helpful for us to kind of understand what we're doing and what could be the next step in developing stuff. That brings me to the final project I want to discuss, and I'm going to discuss a bit more thorough because we're currently working on it, and that's Symbiosis. I'm co-designing that with Mark Meeuwenhoort. And all things come together in this project, I think. So this is the pinky. We once did a thought experiment. I think we don't have the time for it now, but within the thought experiment, we asked the audience to kind of imagine the body shrink towards a pinky. And if you would be the pinky, what would your experience of the world be? The pinky cannot see, it cannot hear, it can touch, and if it's in your tongue, it can be wet and it can feel cold. It can sense a lot of things, but it is very limited also. So it's an interesting thought experiment to kind of what will happen if you're only a pinky, and a lot of animals are only a pinky. They're not all these stuff that we can do. Why is that important? I'm going to split that. This is a shark, and the shark can of course smell and can also see, but it also has a special sensory apparatus. It can see electromagnetic fields. So at close range, when the shark is eating the fish, it can see the brain of the fish. So how amazing! It sees the firework of the synapses flickering off in the brain of the fish. And I always imagine myself, if I would be a fish, or the shark would be evolved as a human, what kind of narratives or understanding or philosophical model would it build of reality? Probably a complete different one than we have. So if the shark would think about quantum mechanics, would it have the same understanding, or actually have a different option to kind of consider? If it thinks about politics, what would be shark politics from the perspective of things being electric energy? So it's an interesting next step in our mind experiment. So how can we change our bodily position into an animalistic position? What might we learn from this position? Because I think the body construct is also creating the way how we perceive reality and can think about it. So in Symbiosis, we're going to investigate that. So in Symbiosis, we're going to create a multi-user VR project where we have 6 users simultaneously in a VR world, but experience the world from a different animal or post-human perspective, or post-animal perspective, or maybe from an artificial intelligence perspective. And they are interconnected in the same world. I always love to show this. This is a human cell. It's one of the most recent photos of the human cell, and it has all this kind of chemical machines in it. Actually, we're a chemical robot. If you think about robots, we're a chemical robot. We also are an evolved complex system where all of these components present in the cell, with the first protocell on Earth, they were not there. So we gained all this apparatus and tools within our cell by merging with other living stuff, or dead stuff, but at least chemical constructs. So this cell is kind of a construct of all these kind of chemical robots pieced together in a membrane and working stuff out together. It's an ecosystem within each cell, and we often think about the human and our brain as the most important thing. We decide, but we already discovered that your gut bacteria are more powerful than your brain. But even on the level of the cell, you're not the only one deciding, and you're a collective. This is the chemical robot taking an endorphin within your brain. It's an animation. This is how it looks. So the natural world is like filled with these symbiotic relationships, and within the project, the Symbiosis project, we want to kind of future think what might happen if we leave this human-centric position where we are in power and decide for other nature what to do and how to live and how to do stuff, how to decide. What will happen if we leave that and move towards a more symbiotic relationship with other living things, or maybe possible new living things. Even plants, we also already thought this was a stupid animal, could not do anything, it's not even an animal. But plants, there's a lot of new science that kind of proves that plants have even maybe social, and some kind of social conscience. They have offspring, and if a plant is sick, the plants, they grow root with their root canals towards the sick plant to help the plant with new nutrients. So it's a social being. And if one plant is kind of attacked by a certain insect, the plant warns the other plants by giving off a chemical smell. It's even so that if a smell is attacked by a certain insect, it can release a smell, luring in the predator of the insect eating you to kill off the intruder. So, and plants are also interconnected with mycelium, where fungi are used as some kind of interconnected communication network to create some kind of communication between plants. So the idea that plants are very non-intelligent or non-active, non-agent, they don't have any agency, is kind of wrong. So this is also interesting. This is also interesting. This is a tarantula spider, and it has, as a pet, it has a frog. And they live together in a symbiotic relationship, because the frog, they can eat the mosquitoes that might harm the spider web of the tarantula. And at the same time, the tarantula safeguards the frog from being eaten. So they're friends, and they have a social relationship maybe. This is another one, a sea cucumber and a pearlfish. The sea cucumber is a house for the pearlfish. It lives in its anus, eats all of the shit of the thing. And this is a more nasty one. It's a wasp, and it has infected the caterpillar, and uses the caterpillar as a food source to kind of grow its own larvae at one moment it pops open the skin, and the larvae they got attached to the leaf, and then you see this little wire connection to this kind of zombie caterpillar still alive, but it is brain hacked by this wasp larvae, and the wasp larvae uses this kind of zombie caterpillar as an animal to chase away predators. So if some animal tries to get to the eggs, it kind of triggers a signal, and the caterpillar is moving to scare off all of these predators. And it's funny because this wasp is actually using the caterpillar as a technology, maybe as a tool, I don't know. It's a way of. So this is the concept. It's VR. Within the VR, we change the body architecture of the human into a non-human body architecture, and we do that with soft robotics. So we create our own inflatable systems. An hour before we had this hard robotics shell from our previous artists, but we use soft robotics, which is inflatable by liquid or air, and we use air to change body architecture or to give you touch stimuli to emphasize certain interactions within the project. This is the first prototypes of two. One, you have the slime mold over here. This is actually some kind of big sleeping bag, but we have filled with pockets that we can manipulate, so you have this jelly feeling when you're inside. And on the outside also has a stimulation. And we have a frog. This is we also have smells within the project. This is the frog, one prototype. We're still now working on a better version. And of course, we use sensors to track the bodies, so it kind of is cohesive with the VR model. And we built our own soft robotic stuff just for fun because we love it. And so we 3D printed, do a lot of tests, a lot of things fail. Be the sensor, and we just did that. It's an old problem. The project is based also on the thinking of Donna Haraway. This book kind of amazed me, staying with the troublemaking in the clutter scene. It's a speculative book of Donna Haraway in which she kind of emphasized the transition that we need to make towards more inclusiveness towards other living beings, especially animals, and also the rights that might and the political rights that needs to be attached to such a new relationship. Maybe I'm in a relationship with my husband and my dog, and I love my dog better than my husband. My dog has no rights, and my husband has rights. So what can we do if this changes, or if we have a baby not with one parent but with 5 parents? So she's advocating for a transition, and also for healing the ecosystem that we're damaging. And she does that in a powerful chapter. In the end of the book, there's the story of Camilla, and that's a speculative science fiction story in which she kind of has a beautiful solution where she kind of depicts a group of people as an answer on overcrowding and loss of biodiversity. Chooses to kind of merge with endangered species. So you have, if people want to have a child or offspring, they gotta merge with an endangered species genetically and create a mixture of a human and an endangered species, for instance an insect or a bird or whatever. So we get new biodiversity, but by doing so you also encapsulate the lost ecosystem and the parent father or mother of the insect or the other animal into your own genetic timeline build-up. So it's really powerful, strong. I thought it was such an amazing idea, and we use that as a backstory for the symbiosis world. So that's kind of the paradigm within which we created the story world, and within that story we created new stories, of course. One of the things Donna Haraway also talks about is about evolution and staying with the trouble. And often if we see a trouble like global warming, we get the tech guys and ask them to solve it. But the problem if we do that is that it's always designed from the current power positions and from the current way of thinking. So you can ask if it will help in the transition. But this is a very beautiful trouble also creates a new possibility. That's also what I want to tell. This is a hedgehog caught in a McFluffy drinking can for ice cream of McDonald's. And of course, if we leave the trash around the McDonald's, these animals they die because they cannot eat anymore if they have this McFlurry on their head. But the hedgehogs without the pins on the back, they will survive. So the trash is also an opportunity. You can also overthink it in a different perspective. This is also, if you think about power sharing and move towards a more inclusive reality, this is a river in New Zealand. And of course the ancient people, Maori of New Zealand, they considered the river a soul, a human, a ghost, a spirit with agency and with importance and almost a family member. And of course in the Western way of thinking we don't see it like that. But now they changed legislation and it's possible for a river to become a person, a legal entity. So by giving the river legal rights, if you pollute it, it can kind of get you to court.
Yeah, we try to do the same here.
Yeah.
In the environment.
Really? Oh, super nice.
We are applying for changing the law, doing exactly the
Very
same
good, very good. In Holland there's also an initiative where they want to have in the power positions within companies and organizations always a representative of non-human to fight for the non-human political agenda. So it's a shifting thing, and that's really beautiful that we move towards this kind of modality. Really cool that you do this.
Well, we try.
Yeah.
We have now it's only like recollecting.
The first step. That's the first step.
We need half million, and we'll present. We'll go to the Congress and present the law in 27th of October.
It's awesome.
So let's see what happens.
There's also a very beautiful story I tell to my students that they have like this. You have to cook this plastic soup in the middle of the Atlantic, and there's always a problem. Of course, nobody cares for it, and they asked for the plastic soup to become a country. So they had like a currency and a passport and all the stuff that comes with a country placed on the plastic soup, and I think they're still waiting for it to if it's recognized. But if it's recognized, the problem is also recognized, and you have agency to solve the problem. So it's very interesting to kind of hack these kind of systems into new modalities. But back to symbiosis. If we think about more equal rights and recognition of other life forms, we have a problem because there's this food dilemma. Our body needs food, and we take the food energy out of food. And up till now, you thought if you were a vegetarian, you were a good guy, but maybe in the future you're still a bad guy, because if the plant has the same right to be there as you have to negotiate about eating it, or how to deal with the food dilemma. So within symbiosis, within all the storylines, we're trying to figure out ideas about how to solve this kind of food dilemma if we move towards a different society. So we created all kind of subcultures that deal with this in a different manner, just to raise the discussion. This is an artwork not from us, but from the Center of Economic Gastronomy, and they created a hotel not for us to eat animals, but for animals to eat us. So you can go to the hotel to be a food source for other ecosystems. So you have this fish nibble your feet, or you can have this insects eat your drink from your eye, or you could die and move your corpse there. And so that's an interesting way. What should we do? Within our story world, we create a culture that is kind of devoted to the idea of seeing the body as a growing space for food for the others. So they kind of grow their body into food source for the community. They share the food and then go in meditation to heal. So that's some of the artwork we're currently working on for this subculture. Little diversity. Another solution is that we have like chemical cyborgs. So these creatures have like other ecosystems as part of their body architecture. And when they need to eat, they don't eat themselves, but they feed the food creating organisms that are implemented in their skin. So they go to nutrient baths to kind of feed these systems. It's another solution, maybe not, maybe, but interesting. We also have like a more technological solution. You have like this food printer, food tamagotchis. They can kind of scatter the raw materials and 3D print that into food. And if you have this if you think about the company, it will start working for you. And if you think about the food, you will get the food. But of course, you also have like very imitation brands that have a very low quality, and they also gather the food. They're a bit lazy. They also use your body as a food source to make the food for you, and that gives you skin rash. So in our world, it's forbidden to kind of think about food in the presence of others. Within the experience symbiosis, we also have food snacks. So we work together with a Michelin star restaurant, Carpendoonse Hoeve, and they created, for each scenario, they created 2 food snacks. So total we have 12. And within the experience, at certain moments, when you have the suggestion that in the story that you might be able to eat something, and you open your mouth, you might get a snack. So, and these are specially designed. This is some kind of eatable soil. This is the stuff that we administer the food with. This is from one of the characters we work with, orchid extract and honey, and we have all these different food designs. And this is how they look in VR. That's also cool. That's one of the triggers that I wanted to do. Like, we never work with food, so we want to work with food. And also because food, I think in all our work there's something like you have to step over a boundary to it. There's always some tension. If I'm scared or not to do so. So, and one of the scary things is, of course, to eat something you don't know what. But within the design, all is vegan, and we don't make very distasteful food. It's all very nice, but it is then something in VR that's not that appetizing. But this is, for instance, one of the pieces of meat that you eat from the sisters, the red one. But it's made from tomato and dried tomato, so it has this fleshy, but it's just tomato. We also use smell and even hormones. So on the suits we have these canisters with smells, and we can control that. And we also use oxytocin, and oxytocin is often misunderstood because they think it's a love drug, and if you smell it, everybody falls in love with each other. It is created, it does trigger kinship and bonding. So if a female has a child, the mother produces the oxytocin to create a strengthened connection with the child, or with the father and the child. So everybody that is part of your kin group is kind of emphasized in building the relationship with each other, actually. So, but the same oxytocin, when it's administered at people who are not part of the same kin group or don't want to be, it emphasizes the distance, and it creates more passive-aggressive stature. So actually these hormones facilitates social groups, the forming of social groups, which is of course cool to include in the project. One of the premises in the story world is also the work of Ben Verenka, and the idea that he works on nanotechnology. So these are chemical robots created on a molecular level. So, and he's actually already succeeded, he got a Nobel Prize for it, to create robots, cars that you can build or canister to do stuff. And of course that's created to be implemented in medical fields to administer drugs to the right precision, but it also opens opportunity to create 3D printers within the body, or to create new body parts or other body parts or new organs that's not there. So I believe very much in this mergent where, like we already talked about it, in the beginning all technology was outside of the body. It's moving more and more inside of the body, it's becoming part of you. And in the beginning technology was this electricity shit with wires and stuff and metal, and it moves towards a biological system. So the future computer will be biological, I'm sure of it. It will be nanoscale, it will be invisible. And it will open a completely different, of course, long term, but a different world. And that's also what we use in the backstory of symbiosis. I also love this research. It's really new. They use eggs of frogs with the stem cell of frogs to create biological robots. These are biological robots made of stem cell, real living cells, and they actually program themselves into different variations. And the stuff that doesn't work, they let it die, and the stuff that does something, they let it survive. So they kind of, farming biological robots. This is cool because when you have an operation, you don't have to have an incision. It's painless. It will open another complete new realm of interaction. Because why not design for the goldfish? This is also very fascinating. I love her work. It's an inspiration for us. She creates a soft robotic system like what we do to heal environments. And she does very beautiful, nature-like robotics to aid ecosystems instead of harming them. So I want to show you just for fun, because it's so cool and very beautiful. Also speculative, but I think it's not nonsense. If we think about technology, we think it as opposite to natural. It's not natural, but I think we can make beautiful nature-like systems that are almost doing the same thing in a positive way, are as beautiful, and they can coexist. So symbiosis is also about that coexistence, not to look at the opposite, and also not to look at it in a utopian way that it solves all our problems. We will still have trouble, but we also have to deal with that with different narratives. This is one of the main characters. Just you can be within the experience. You can be this character. It's a Colorado River toad mixture with a human. And this is a slime mold, and this is an actual picture of a slime mold. And the slime mold, maybe you know it, is a one-cellular being, and it's a real enigma in the biology, because of course we think all one-cellular things are stupid, but this animal doesn't have a brain, but it's able to share information, to calculate efficient pathways between points. It's actually used for scientific research in the distribution of black matter in the universe, because it's doing such a good job in finding the most efficient way of distribution. It is even farming, so it is farming microbes and yeast, and when the soil is not good enough, it moves to another spot, sows out this yeast to harvest it later. It can split each other, and it has 1,000 different genders. So this is a really cool living animal, and in our performance you will beat this animal. And this is an animal, or actually a human, in the narrative is a human, that now you have like transsexual, people want to turn into another gender, of course, and that's sometimes a very good solution, sometimes has different problems, but it is about identity change and finding the right identity, the right body that fits your brain, your mind, your feeling. Within Symbiosis we have a creature that is not doing this on a gender way, but in a trans-species way. So it was a human turned into a butterfly combination, human butterfly, and then turned into orchid. And the story is about how that changed her perception and spiritual thinking about relationship and feeling and that kind of stuff. I'm going to show you a small sound clip.
It took 14 months to infuse the body of my third becoming with the orchid plant structures of the fourth becoming. Gene therapy is always rather painless, but a full body transition also involves nano-robotic surgery. I remember the itchy pain sensation, the grinding sounds
of intestines pathfinding away inside my body, waking me up in the middle of the night even when I was sedated. The deafening smell of the body leaking, the changes in metabolism, and the long process to get acquainted with the new and unfamiliar body architecture. I was prepared for the pain, but not for the mental transitions. The emotional flesh of the mammal body slowly extinguished, and new orchid sensory perceptions opened up. Sexuality dissolved and got replaced by nectar transpiration. A new realm of stillness and liquid thinking opened up. For the first time, I had the feeling my bodily tellings matched my soul.
Preview. Good. Next. Escape. Almost there. I don't see handkerchiefs. Wait. So within this we created another sculpture in between the butterfly and the human. So it's somewhere in between. These are some sketches for that. And this is an animal we're creating for. It's a symbiotic animal. It's actually two animals. One is the stomach of the other, and it can creep away to find food. Some of the artwork, just to show it to you. I'm waiting for the picture. Another one. Just skip that. Let's skip that. For the last story, I got my inspiration on the anglerfish, and it's really cool. You have in the deep sea, it's of course hard to find each other. A female and a male, it's a huge problem to find each other. The male has an excellent sense of smell, and the female is really big, and the male is very small. So when the male is born, it doesn't eat. It cannot eat. And it's just only looking for a female. That's its only purpose in life. And 99% of all male die. So it's not really a pleasant world. But the 1% that kind of finds the female, it bites into the skin of the female, and from that moment on, the female administers a hormone that melts away the flesh of the male, and it kind of connects the male body for permanent on the female body, and includes it in its bloodstream. And then when the female is fertile and has her eggs, she sends another hormone, and as a robot, this male releases its sperm. So it's a very efficient way of reproducing, and a very romantic way of thinking about love and sexuality. So for the last, so you can see it is the female, and the small things are the males interconnected. Sometimes they have several males. So within the last project, we're going to create a multi-body where we have multiple people on the floor interconnected, 3 people in the same suit. So we have 3 people who want to become one robotic suit, and we have like one story, but with 3 people interconnected in the story and manipulating within each other. We also, when we start off this like design of such a soft robotics, we start off performative. We do all kinds of experiments, what works, what is interesting, just as a physical sensation. Yeah, most of it is crap and not interesting. And then if we have architecture, we have of course to remodel that into Unity, into 3D models, which is also interesting because all of the software is kind of designed for humans. So if you want to have a non-human skeleton, all things doesn't work anymore. So we have to reinvent that kind of stuff. That's really cool. We have sensors to track the body, and then we can make it coherent. These are some really simple experiments with the first soft robotics, just to show what kind of things, movement. Some of this is just story and then worked on it. But here you see me having this on the cheek, and that was really cool because we have this frog. So we now we have this frog prosthesis that you have this pulsating cheeks, and it's really crazy. If you step out of the experience, you kind of think, well, where are my cheeks? I'm missing them. I want to have them back. So some more experimentation. I'm going to skip that. This is also studio. Me and Mark exploring. Multi-body, we have interconnected the legs. And I'm asking, oh, should use 2 legs? Oh, good idea. Okay. Yeah, good idea. It's cool. And then another. It's fun to do, sorry. No. And another one.
Thank you, maybe look
that's just a day in the studio. So then we make a more serious attempt, and this is for the multi-body. Some of the sketches I'm going to skip on it very fast. Then we take in silhouettes, then maybe possible bodies. And then we send this to the art designer. He makes these awesome 3D models, which are way cooler than my sketches. These are the cheeks, I already told you. Yeah, it's also a problem if you want to be the animal, you should see your body. But if you have a 3D model and you move to your back, you kind of move your back through the model. So we had to kind of do a different body for your own vision. So these are some sketches that now he's looking at the VR camera until he sees his own body, which is really cool because then it becomes you. But it took a lot of week of R&D to kind of have such a simple thing working that it's convincing. But also, how does the slime mold see if it doesn't have eyes? Of course it doesn't have eyes, so we had to make something that's interesting. So now we created this more chemical jelly thing, so you're looking at like you're inside the plasma of the animal. This is small research for the slime mold. We want to have this stretching sound, that it's electricity moving through the animal, so we used candy, this popping candy for the sound. Where is it? Ah, yeah. But it also shows how such a project evolves. This is the original sound, and after this you hear how it's used in the body sound. And then we thought it would be cool because it's the futurist hybrid. We use the vocoder sound for the text. This is how it's now in the experience. It's more digitized.
I sense a polished tree, hesitant love seeds waiting to bloom.
Early sketches from slime mold.
I sense a pollen tree,
This is a human actor,
hesitant love
feather.
seeds waiting to bloom.
There's more
The nervous woods. I almost forgot about them.
Well, actually, there's not one center because the slime mold has different cell cores. It doesn't have one center, so now we make it more abstract. It's more like
I
a
sense a
fire.
pollen on a tree, hesitant love seeds waiting to bloom. The nervous woods. I almost forgot about their cries.
As a spin-off to the Symbiosis project, we're going to create an app, and with this app, people we can involve the audience to kind of co-create the future with us. So this will be some kind of digital Lego system where you can create new pieces of nature, and then you can plant that as an AR creature in the existing nature. So we work together with the botanical garden in Utrecht, and you can make your own story. You can have the animal or the plant created and planted. This is
Al is die minuut gepland,
this is
en dan is het ook aan kunnen gaan over hoe
yeah, it's just
we
AR, not so interesting. but interesting to involve the audience into this discussion. Yeah, I wanted to end off my talk with this slide, and that's about we are talking about storytelling and about reality a lot. And when I was young, I was interested in summoning spirits and this medieval alchemy, that kind of realm of course, in Middle Ages, people thought, yeah, biology, nature, art, it was interconnected, it was one thing. And they actually thought that they could summon spirits from beyond. And to do that, you had to draw a pentagon and step into it, and you would have to collect symbols to kind of summon the spirit with the right elements, fire, something to symbolize fire, something to symbolize water. But then, and that's the beauty, you have to weave a spell with words. So the actual spell to summon something into existence is an interweaving of words. And I thought that was always, of course, very beautiful, and then you think it's crap if you think about science, and of course I don't believe in summoning spirits. But recently I started overthinking because I really love this narrative, interweaving the words into a spell to emerge something into existence. And I think they are completely right, because as a storyteller, you kind of interweave concepts and words into a new reality, and from the moment that you've done that, it's planted into the brains and the minds of the audience, and it's planted into us, and it becomes part of culture, and becomes part as a thing that has agency to change things and to change the world. So that's the importance, I think, also for us as artists, to create the story and to create the magic to change transitions. And that's my talk. Thank you.
Okay, maybe someone have any question? Maybe everybody is tired now. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Coming here, it was really exciting. A lot of things we bring with us today. I don't know. Thank you so much.
I have a lot of things on my mind, but
Yeah.
some about them over there. Yeah. The most kind of the thing that I keep thinking about is like, you're terrible, terrible people. moved from telling stories to sort of like planting the seeds for the people to create their own stories, whether good or bad, but it's sort of like coming out from their own psyche. And right now you are basically changing their whole being in a way. Like you've moved from a completely textual narrative to one that messes up with their entire being. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's correct. It's partly because I think as myself as an artist, I feel a transition away from just making a narrative into creating an experience to being it. So for me, that's very important. We have so much narratives, and it's all about us, and it's all about the same patterns and the all crappy psychology. And I think it's boring. Not that I have better stuff, but I think, for me, I see my role as an artist in reframing, and I think in general that might be the work that has the most impactful, possible most impactful use for other people, because I think in reframing current situation into a new one, it triggers new thought. It doesn't have to be a better answer, but it opens up a world to play in and to kind of think about different dilemmas, different problems, and therefore maybe that can sometimes backfire and help us in the now.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. It's like the reframing that you're talking about is a complete change in perspective, which is what I think it's quite interesting about your work, that you've gone from okay, this is our perspective as humans, to let me see what's your perspective as a human, and now you are in, let's forget about humans. Right? Let's just try to think as we weren't.
In the end, we are and we stay human. I cannot never throw it away because it's me. But for me, it's about finding different ideas. Yeah, that's it. Not necessarily better ones, but different ones that kind of sparks interest or get you excited. I never expected to. Of course, I knew about Donna Haraway, but for me, she triggered something that kind of all pieces came together. We were thinking about doing something with VR and taste. We were thinking about doing something, redesigning the body. We actually pitched it for a commercial or something, like do a dinner on Titan and you'll be an alien, something like that. But that also felt a bit like gimmicky. And then reading the stuff of Donna Haraway, all this stuff fell together and kind of created one fabric. And I really like, we have like tons of ideas already on the waiting, but I'm still waiting for the connection where these sometimes kind of make the magic connection to become stronger than the actual idea. And that's sometimes it's just also chance, or and that's what I love about science or about new discovery or new technology also. We saw the technology of this haptic, mid-air haptics, and it's so amazing. And when I see it, I want to design for it. So we're trying to get connected to universities, to new knowledge, to kind of be the early adepts, to be the first ones to kind of figure out new stuff with that. And that also is very risky, because that's always, we talked about it this afternoon. If you do stuff that nobody does or isn't kind of new, actually nothing that we're doing, nobody is doing, everybody's doing it, but if you do it in a new way from an artistic practice, a lot of this is complete R&D. You don't know where you end up. You should not set goals because you always fail and get miserable about it. but you have to go along with the experimentation. And then the experimentation brings you to a space that you didn't expect, and it's much richer than you could ever imagine, I think. That's what I think I've learned a bit.